evening and welcome back to another episode of Sleeping with the Dinosaurs. Tonight, we invite you to step back into the mists of deep time, into a world lush and green, where the air was warmer, the forests were endless, and where some of the largest creatures ever to walk the earth lived and thrived. Our focus tonight will be on one of these giants, a creature whose immense form has captured imaginations for generations. This is the Apatosaurus, a towering sauropod with a body like a moving mountain, a neck that seemed to stretch toward the heavens, and a tail that could sweep the air like a great whip. As we journey together through its world, we will uncover not just the science behind this magnificent dinosaur, but also the feeling of being close to it, of hearing its deep rumbling steps echo through the valley, of watching its massive shape pass through ancient forests, and of imagining the stillness of night as such titans moved across the land. Before we begin our exploration, we would like to ask you to support this series by gently tapping the like button, and if you have not already, subscribing to the channel so you can continue joining us on these prehistoric journeys. And as always, we would love to know where you are listening from tonight, whether it is a quiet bedroom, a long journey, or under the stars. Please share your location in the comments below. Now let us begin, as we step softly into the Jurassic world to meet the Apatosaurus. Close your eyes for a moment and let your imagination drift far, far back through the corridors of time. The present world falls away, and you are carried across millions upon millions of years until you arrive in a land utterly different from the one we know today. The clocks of history have turned back to the late Jurassic period, roughly 150 million years ago, and the Earth wears a face both familiar and alien. The air here is heavy with warmth. No icy winds sweep down from polar caps, for in this age the planet is warmer, more humid, and more stable in its climate. Vast shallow seas stretch across continents, their waters warm and filled with life. The lands are split into wide, drifting plates, but they have not yet assembled into the shapes we see on a modern map. Instead, broad plains and swelling uplands spread out beneath an ancient sun, glowing golden against the haze of a lush horizon. Look around, and you will see greenery that feels both ancient and enduring. Towering conifers rise like the pillars of great cathedrals, their dark crowns brushing the humid sky. Beneath them grow thickets of cycads, their stiff, fern-like leaves splaying outward in clusters. Real ferns, too, blanket the forest floor in long curling fronds that unfurl in the dappled light. Horsetails, tall and reed-like, spring up near water's edge, their hollow stems creating a whispering chorus as the breeze passes through. This is not a landscape of flowers, for the age of flowering plants is yet to come. Instead, the Jurassic forests are dominated by ancient lineages that have endured since deep prehistory, creating a scene both primeval and serene. The air is alive with sound, though not the chatter of birds as we know them. Early avians and small feathered dinosaurs do flit between branches, but their calls are sharper, less melodic, more reptilian in tone. Insects hum in clouds near the ground, their buzzing persistent and dense, feeding on the moisture and plants that thrive in this climate. In the distance, the earth occasionally trembles with a deep resonance, the sound of something massive moving across the land. It is in this world of giants that our story takes place. Imagine the ground beneath your feet. The soil is rich, fed by countless ages of decayed plant matter, spongy beneath the canopy, dry and dusty in open clearings. Across the landscape, rivers carve their silver paths, winding and glistening under the sun. These rivers are the arteries of the Jurassic world, giving life to the creatures that drink from them and shaping the valleys where the great herds roam. From time to time, sudden storms sweep across the land. Heavy rains crash down, drumming against the canopy, swelling rivers in hours and turning flat ground into marshy basins. Then, as quickly as they came, the storms pass, leaving behind the heavy perfume of damp greenery and the soft rising mist of evaporating water. Step back now and take in the broader picture. Across the plains, scattered among groves of trees, roam immense herds of sauropods, the long-necked dinosaurs, the titans of their age. They move slowly, deliberately, their colossal bodies shaking the ground. Among them is the Apatosaurus, a creature so vast that it redefines our sense of scale. Picture a single individual moving along the riverbank, a body stretching nearly 75 feet from nose to tail, taller than a two-story house and weighing more than 20 tons. Its very presence is a reminder of how different, how extraordinary this world truly is. But Apatosaurus is not alone here. Look closer and you will see stegosaurs grazing among the cycads, their spiked tails swinging idly as they crop low plants. Small flocks of pterosaurs rise from the water's edge, their wings shimmering like leathery sails in the sunlight. Far in the distance, a group of carnivorous Allosaurus moves along the ridge, their movements patient, calculating, their eyes fixed on the vast herds below. Life here is not peaceful in the sense of safety, but balanced, a constant interplay between predator and prey, growth and decay, creation and destruction. The climate of this late Jurassic land plays a crucial role in sustaining giants like Apatosaurus. Warm temperatures mean faster plant growth, and high levels of carbon dioxide enrich the atmosphere, giving plants what they need to flourish. With no frost to halt their cycles, the forests grow nearly year-round, providing an endless banquet for herbivores. Yet this lushness comes at a price. Wildfires sometimes sweep across the plains during dry seasons, flames crackling through ferns and cycads, sending towering conifers crashing to the ground. For the dinosaurs, survival is a rhythm, migrating to new feeding grounds, seeking water in dry spells, and moving as herds to ensure safety in numbers. Pause for a moment and imagine the colors of this world. The forests are not the deep green of modern pines and spruces, but lighter, more varied, with the grey-green fronds of cycads, the bright flashes of ferns and the reddish tones of conifer bark. The skies are hazy with warmth, often streaked with long clouds that drift slowly across the heavens. At sunset, the land glows with deep golds and reds, casting the immense dinosaurs in silhouettes that stretch endlessly across the plains. At night, the stars emerge brighter than we could ever see today, for no human lights compete with their brilliance. The constellations are unfamiliar, the arrangement of Earth's axis shifted, but their eternal shimmer reflects upon the calm rivers and the backs of sleeping giants. The sounds of night are different here too. Cicadas and other insects form a constant chorus. Small reptiles rustle in the undergrowth, while the occasional screech of a pterosaur cuts through the darkness. But most haunting of all are the deep, resonant calls of the sauropods. These are not high cries but low rumbles, sounds that roll through the ground as much as the air, vibrations that can be felt more than heard. It is easy to imagine Apatosaurus communicating across miles in this way, its calls weaving through the night air like a language older than memory. As dawn rises, the cycle begins again. Mist clings to the valleys, wrapping the conifers in soft veils of white. Slowly the herds stir. The massive forms of Apatosaurus move forward, their necks sweeping gracefully as they search for the day's first meal. Youngsters follow the protective forms of adults, their smaller frames dwarfed by the titans around them. Insects scatter from their feet, birds and early avians take to the air, and the ground itself seems to come alive as the giants resume their endless search for sustenance. This is the world into which Apatosaurus was born, a world of abundance and danger, of stability and change. It is a world that speaks of scale beyond human comprehension, where creatures of enormous size lived ordinary lives, eating, resting, protecting their young, and carrying forward the eternal rhythm of existence. And as we walk further into this world, we will turn our eyes more closely upon the Apatosaurus itself, and consider what it means to be a creature so vast, so ancient, and yet so familiar in its needs. Imagine for a moment that you are standing upon the edge of a great Jurassic valley. The morning mist has only just begun to lift, leaving trails of silver vapor clinging to the forested slopes and curling above the slow-moving river below. The air is heavy with warmth, carrying the earthy perfume of damp ferns and the resinous scent of towering conifers. All around, the land hums with life. Insects buzz like distant strings, frogs croak near the water's edge, and somewhere in the canopy, the sharp call of a small feathered dinosaur echoes faintly. Yet all these sounds fall away when you notice a shape moving through the haze. A shape so enormous that it seems at first like part of the landscape itself. From the shifting curtain of mist emerges the Apatosaurus. Your first impression is not of speed or aggression, but of sheer breathtaking scale. It is as though the earth itself has risen and begun to walk. The creature's legs are like columns, each one thick enough that a human could not wrap their arms around it. Its back arches gently like a bridge, rising higher than your head even at its lowest point, and stretching forward into that impossibly long neck, a living tower that seems to both anchor and elevate the animal's immense frame. The Apatosaurus moves slowly, but each step carries an undeniable power. The ground shudders faintly beneath its weight. Pebbles tremble, loose soil shifts, birds scatter from the underbrush in a flutter of wings, as if the earth itself has startled them awake. With every measured stride, the dinosaur's vast body sways with a rhythm that feels steady, ancient, almost timeless. There is no rush in its movements. This is a creature that has existed in harmony with its world for millions of years, and it moves with the calm assurance of something that knows its place in the great cycle of life. Its tail extends behind it like a vast balancing rod, stretching nearly the length of its body, tapering from a trunk-thick base to a slender whip-like end. As it moves, the tail drags through the ferns and brushes aside young saplings, leaving a subtle path of disturbance in its wake. At times, the tail lifts slightly, swaying through the air with the weight of inevitability, and one cannot help but wonder how powerful a weapon it might become if lashed with speed. The mere possibility adds an undertone of awe, a reminder that even gentle giants have means of defense when threatened. Your gaze rises again to the neck, that graceful sweep that arcs forward from the shoulders like the mast of a ship. It is not stiff, but flexible in its own massive way, moving gently side to side as the Apatosaurus scans the greenery around it. And then, finally, your eyes meet its head. To your surprise, it is small, almost comically so when compared with the enormity of the body behind it. The skull is elongated and narrow, the jaw lined with simple peg-like teeth adapted for stripping vegetation. Its eyes are calm, dark, and steady, giving the impression not of intelligence as we might define it, but of an enduring awareness, the simple and patient knowing of a creature that measures time in seasons, not in moments. The sound of the Apatosaurus is subtle but overwhelming in its effect. You hear the creak of muscle and sinew beneath its skin, the steady thump of its footfalls, and the deep, resonant exhalation as it breathes. Each breath emerges as a warm mist that hangs briefly in the cool morning air, dispersing slowly as though reluctant to leave. From time to time, a low rumble vibrates in its throat, not a roar or a cry, but a kind of infrasonic communication, a sound that you feel more in your chest and the soles of your feet than you hear with your ears. Perhaps it is meant for others of its kind, echoing through the forest like the heartbeat of the Jurassic itself. Standing near such a being, it is impossible not to be humbled. All notions of human scale, of what it means to be large, dissolve in an instant. The Apatosaurus does not move with the nervous energy of smaller creatures, nor does it carry the predatory tension of the great carnivores. Instead, it embodies something different, a slow, enduring presence, as if it is less a beast and more a living extension of the earth. Now picture the landscape around it. Other members of the herd move through the valley in the same deliberate rhythm, their bodies casting long shadows across the ferns as the sun rises higher. Together they form a procession of giants, their sheer numbers making the valley seem alive with movement. Each neck sways in unison, rising and falling like the masts of ships upon an ancient sea. Dust rises in soft clouds around their feet, and the low rumble of their collective breaths creates a harmony that thrums through the land. For a listener drifting into sleep, Imagine what it would feel like to rest on the edge of that valley, your body warmed by the Jurassic sun, the gentle thunder of footsteps lulling you deeper into calm. The Apatosaurus does not threaten, does not disturb. It simply exists in its vastness, moving through the world with a grace that belies its colossal form. To fall asleep here is to surrender to the rhythm of giants, to breathe in time with their steps, to feel the slow pulse of a world where time moves differently. And yet, there is also curiosity. How can such a vast creature live? How does it eat enough to sustain its size? How does it defend itself from predators bold enough to test it? These questions linger as you watch the herd, questions that paleontologists have asked since the first bones of Apatosaurus were pulled from the earth. But in this moment of first impression, those questions feel less important than the awe that surrounds you. To simply stand in the shadow of an Apatosaurus is to be reminded of how vast life can become, how magnificent evolution's possibilities truly are. If you were to approach closer, you would hear the texture of its skin brushing against the undergrowth. Paleontologists believe it may have been covered in pebbly scales, much like those of modern reptiles, possibly dotted with larger, rougher osteoderms along its back. In the morning light, its skin would shine with subtle tones, earthy greys, muted browns, perhaps hints of green that helped it blend into its environment. Each fold and crease speaks of the enormous muscles beneath, muscles that move with quiet power, supporting a life that endures for decades upon decades. Children of Apatosaurus wander among the legs of adults, their smaller frames still immense compared to any human. They look upward to the swaying necks of their guardians, and with each step they learn the rhythm of herd life. Even here, in this moment of simple observation, the story of survival, growth, and continuity is clear. The herd is more than a collection of individuals. It is a lineage stretching backward into prehistory and forward into ages yet to come. As you watch, the Apatosaurus lowers its neck to sweep along a grove of ferns. Its teeth strip the greenery with a soft rasping sound, and you realize that much of its day is likely spent in this simple act, gathering enough food to sustain its massive body. The calm of its movements makes clear that it is in no rush. The land provides and the giant accepts, carrying on the endless cycle of feeding, resting, and moving. Your first impression of Apatosaurus, then, is not only of its immensity, but of its peace. It is a creature that defines the landscape, that embodies the slowness and grandeur of its world. It is not a monster nor a myth, but a living being that once walked the earth with steady steps, shaping the land with its presence. And as the herd drifts onward, their colossal bodies vanishing slowly into the distance, the valley falls quiet again. The echoes of their steps linger in the ground beneath you, a reminder that you have witnessed something extraordinary, something far beyond the scale of ordinary life. As we continue, we will move beyond these first impressions, looking closer at the very structure of Apatosaurus, at the bones and muscles that allowed such size to exist. But for now, let the image remain with you. The morning in the Jurassic, the mist lifting, and a giant emerging from the haze, vast, calm, and eternal. To understand the Apatosaurus, one must begin not just with its appearance, but with the inner framework that allowed such a giant to exist. Its body was not simply large. It was a masterwork of natural engineering, a balance between power and lightness, between weight and mobility. Every bone, every muscle, every tendon was a solution to the challenge of supporting and moving a creature that could stretch over 70 feet in length and weigh more than 20 tons. Let us begin with its legs, for they were the pillars upon which its entire world rested. Thick as tree trunks, each leg ended in broad, sturdy feet. The front feet, or forelimbs, bore 5 digits, though only the inner ones carried claws, while the others formed a more rounded pad that distributed its weight. The hind feet were larger, bearing 4 main toes that pressed deep impressions into the Jurassic soil. Fossilized trackways left by sauropods give us glimpses into this anatomy, showing rounded footprints that record the slow, deliberate stride of these animals. Imagine standing beside one of these impressions, A single footprint could easily measure several feet across, large enough to swallow your entire body if it were a pool of water. The bones within these legs were not hollow like those of birds, nor fragile. They were dense, robust, thickened to carry extraordinary loads. And yet, despite their density, the arrangement of joints and tendons allowed the legs to act much like the columns of a cathedral, bearing the immense mass of the body without collapsing under strain. Each step of an Apatosaurus was a feat of balance and endurance, a shifting of colossal weight from one pillar to the next, in a rhythm so steady that it could continue for hours without faltering. Moving upward, consider the spine, the great backbone that stretched from skull to tail. The vertebrae of Apatosaurus are among the most remarkable ever discovered. Some of them, particularly those of the neck and tail, were immense in size, yet surprisingly light in structure. They were riddled with air sacs, hollow chambers within the bone that reduced their weight while maintaining strength. This adaptation, known as pneumaticity, is also seen in modern birds and is thought to have been connected to the animal's respiratory system. Imagine a vertebra as large as a barrel, but with the architecture of a cathedral window inside it, arches and cavities that give strength without unnecessary heaviness. These air-filled bones made it possible for the Apatosaurus to carry its long neck and tail without exhausting itself. Without them, the sheer mass of such elongated structures would have been crippling. Instead, the neck became a flexible arm of the body, able to sweep across wide ranges of vegetation, while the tail became both counterbalance and potential defense. Together, they made the Apatosaurus appear almost like a living bridge, a central span supported at either end by sweeping extensions. Now let us linger upon that tail. In Apatosaurus, it was not simply long, but exceptionally robust near its base and narrowing into a whip-like end. Scientists have debated its function for many years. Some propose it served as a defensive weapon, capable of being lashed with enough force to crack like a whip and deter predators. Others suggest it may have been a means of communication, its movement sending signals through a herd or even generating low-frequency sounds. Whatever its exact use, the tail was an essential component of its anatomy, a living counterweight that balanced the forward stretch of the neck, ensuring stability in every step. The rib cage of Apatosaurus was vast, creating a barrel-like torso capable of housing the organs needed to sustain such an enormous creature. The heart, for instance, would have been immense, powerful enough to pump blood all the way to the head, which could rise several meters above the ground. Modern estimates suggest it may have weighed hundreds of pounds, beating steadily to circulate blood through arteries thicker than a human arm. The lungs, too, were extraordinary. Linked to the air sacs within the vertebrae, they likely functioned in a system similar to birds where air flows continuously in one direction, allowing for more efficient oxygen exchange than in mammals. This adaptation would have been crucial for fueling the steady, slow-burning engine of a giant. Muscles wrapped around this skeleton in vast sheets, their fibers thick and strong, anchored by tendons to the bones. Consider the sheer force required for a single step, lifting tens of thousands of pounds from the ground, shifting it forward, and setting it down again. Each movement demanded a harmony of muscles pulling and releasing in sequence, like the synchronized ropes of a massive suspension bridge. And yet, the result was not clumsy. Fossil trackways suggest that Apatosaurus moved with a steady, confident gait, capable of covering miles each day in search of food and water. Its neck, long and muscular, was not a limp or fragile structure, but one carefully engineered to support its own weight. Strong ligaments ran along the spine, particularly over the shoulders and back, forming a ridge of connective tissue that acted like a suspension cable to hold the neck aloft. Each vertebra locked into the next with complex joints, allowing both stability and motion. While it could not raise its neck vertically like a giraffe, it could sweep it in broad arcs, grazing across low-lying plants or browsing from taller shrubs and trees. In this way, a single Apatosaurus could cover a vast feeding area without moving its entire body. The head itself, though small, was equally a product of adaptation. Its jaws were lined with chisel-shaped teeth, perfect for stripping leaves and ferns rather than chewing them thoroughly. Instead of grinding its food as mammals do, Apatosaurus swallowed vegetation in large amounts, relying on its immense gut to process the material slowly. It is thought that gastroliths, smooth stones found in association with some sauropod fossils, may have been swallowed to help grind plant matter in the stomach, much like modern birds use gizzard stones. This digestive strategy allowed the animal to fuel its immense body with relative efficiency, turning forests into fuel for life on a scale almost beyond comprehension. Even its skin may have played a role in its strength. Fossilized impressions suggest a pebbly texture, tough and protective, perhaps dotted with larger scales along the back. Such skin would have guarded against parasites, sun, and injury, forming a living armor that endured through decades of life. And life itself was long for these creatures. Estimates suggest that Apatosaurus may have lived for many decades, perhaps even a century, its anatomy designed for endurance as much as for strength. When one considers the Apatosaurus in full, its columnar legs, air-filled vertebrae, whip-like tail, massive heart and lungs, and efficient digestive system, it becomes clear that this was not merely a giant, but a marvel of evolutionary design. Each part of its anatomy answered a question posed by its size. How does one support such weight? With thick legs and lightened bones. How does one move such mass? With powerful muscles and balanced proportions, how does one fuel such a life? With an endless appetite and a digestive system suited for bulk processing, how does one endure for decades? With resilient skin, strong bones, and the slow rhythm of a creature built not for speed, but for longevity. And so, the Apatosaurus was not just a symbol of strength, but an embodiment of harmony between form and function. Its anatomy reveals a life lived at the edge of possibility, a body that stretched the limits of what land animals could achieve. Yet, it did so not through brute force alone, but through elegance, adaptation, and balance. As we move forward, let us carry this picture with us, a creature whose very bones whispered of air and lightness, whose muscles spoke of power, and whose every breath carried the echo of a heart large enough to sustain a living mountain. In the next part of our journey, we will look more closely at that long neck, the defining feature of Apatosaurus and its kin, and explore how it shaped the way this giant lived, fed, and moved through its world. When one thinks of the Apatosaurus, the image that most often comes to mind is its long and sweeping neck. It is this feature, more than any other, that defines its silhouette against the Jurassic horizon. Stretching forward from the immense torso, the neck of Apatosaurus could measure over 15 feet in length, an astonishing extension of the body that transformed how this giant interacted with its environment. To stand in the shadow of such a creature is to be struck not only by its size, but by the reach and grace of that extraordinary structure. From a distance, the neck seems to move almost independently of the body, like a serpent rising and falling through the greenery. It arcs slowly as the animal scans its surroundings, dipping down toward the low fronds of ferns, and then sweeping upward toward the canopy of conifers. For the Apatosaurus, the neck was both tool and lifeline, an instrument designed by evolution to bridge the space between body and food, between survival and abundance. The question of how Apatosaurus used its neck has fascinated scientists for generations. Unlike the giraffe of today, whose neck is carried almost vertically to browse on treetop leaves, the Apatosaurus likely held its neck more horizontally, projecting outward from the shoulders rather than reaching high into the sky. This posture is suggested by the structure of its vertebrae and the range of motion possible in the joints. With its head held forward at this level, the Apatosaurus could sweep a wide arc of vegetation without taking many steps, grazing like a living scythe across the Jurassic landscape. Imagine then the efficiency of this design. With its neck extended, the Apatosaurus could strip foliage from a swath of plants stretching yards in every direction. It did not need to bend its massive body toward the ground repeatedly, nor did it need to uproot itself constantly in search of food. Instead, the neck allowed it to remain relatively stationary while gathering mouthful after mouthful of leaves. This would have been a vital adaptation, For sustaining a body weighing more than 20 tons required a staggering intake of food, perhaps several hundred pounds of plant matter each day. But the possibilities of the neck extended beyond horizontal browsing. Though it may not have lifted its head skyward like a giraffe, it could certainly raise or lower its neck across a wide vertical range. In times of need, it may have reached into taller branches, stripping pine needles or conifer fronds from trees that other herbivores could not touch. At the same time, it could sweep low to graze upon cycads, horsetails, and ground-level ferns. In this way, Apatosaurus could exploit multiple layers of vegetation, feeding across a vertical spectrum that few animals could match. This adaptability may have given it an advantage in diverse environments, reducing competition with other giant herbivores like Diplodocus, which may have specialized more in low browsing. The mechanics of the neck are equally remarkable. Each vertebra was massive, yet filled with air sacs that reduced its weight. These vertebrae interlocked with complex joints that provided stability while still allowing movement. Strong ligaments ran along the spine and into the neck, acting like cables on a suspension bridge, distributing the weight and preventing collapse. Muscles along the sides and base of the neck added further support, allowing the animal to raise, lower, and sweep its head with slow but steady control. The entire structure was a triumph of evolutionary engineering, balancing length, strength, and lightness in a way that made life at this scale possible. And then, there is the head itself. Small, narrow, and deceptively modest compared to the immense framework that carried it. Its jaws were lined with simple chisel-like teeth, perfectly suited for stripping leaves, but not for grinding them. Unlike mammals, Apatosaurus did not chew its food. Instead, it snipped or raked vegetation into its mouth and swallowed it whole. Processing would take place in its immense digestive tract, where fermentation and possibly the aid of swallowed stones, gastroliths, broke down the tough plant matter. The neck, therefore, was not just a means of reaching food, but also a conduit for rapidly funneling enormous amounts of vegetation into a stomach that worked like a living compost heap. Consider for a moment the daily rhythm of feeding. At dawn, the Apatosaurus stirs, its breath visible in the cool mist. Slowly, its neck arcs downward toward a bed of ferns, and it begins to feed, each mouthful torn with a rasping sound. The head moves steadily, rhythmically, sweeping side to side like a pendulum, stripping vegetation as it goes. As the sun climbs higher, the animal lifts its neck, stretching toward the lower branches of a conifer grove. It pulls fronds free with ease, dropping them into its waiting mouth. The day passes in this slow but relentless motion, lowering, lifting, sweeping, stripping. Hours blur into the steady rhythm of eating, for the body of a giant demands constant sustenance. Such feeding behavior would not have been solitary. Picture a herd of Apatosaurus moving together across the land, their necks weaving like a living forest of serpents. Each one feeds within its own arc, yet the combined effect is mesmerizing. Dozens of long necks swaying through the greenery in quiet harmony. The sound of tearing leaves fills the air, mingling with the soft thump of footsteps as the herd gradually shifts to new patches of growth. Wherever they go, the landscape is subtly reshaped, plants cropped low, branches stripped bare, pathways carved by their immense bodies. This method of feeding would have had profound effects on the Jurassic ecosystem. By consuming such vast quantities of vegetation, herds of Apatosaurus helped regulate plant growth, preventing forests from becoming overly dense. Their movements opened pathways for smaller animals, their droppings fertilized the soil, and their selective browsing may even have encouraged the spread of certain plants over others. In this way, the long neck of Apatosaurus was not merely a personal adaptation, it was a force that shaped entire landscapes. There is also the question of energy. Moving a neck of such length required careful balance. If it were too heavy, the strain on muscles and ligaments would be unsustainable. But by filling the vertebrae with air sacs, and by anchoring the neck with a system of strong but lightweight supports, evolution crafted a solution. Modern biomechanical studies suggest that the energy cost of holding the neck horizontally may have been surprisingly low, allowing Apatosaurus to feed for hours without exhausting itself. Some scientists have even suggested that the neck might have played roles beyond feeding. It could have been used in displays, perhaps raised or swung during interactions with other members of the herd. Males might have used their necks in dominance rituals, or as visual signals of health and strength. While the fossil record cannot confirm such behaviors directly, the sheer size and visibility of the neck make it plausible that it served both practical and social purposes. Standing before an Apatosaurus in its prime, you would see all of this embodied in a single gesture, the slow sweep of its head through the greenery. There is elegance in its efficiency, beauty in its simplicity. Every movement speaks of balance. The balance between size and function, between survival and abundance, between the needs of the individual and the shaping of the environment. As the day draws to a close, the Apatosaurus lowers its neck one final time, stripping the last of the ferns before the light fades. It lifts its head slowly, casting its gaze across the valley, and exhales a deep rumble that rolls through the air. The herd begins to settle, their long necks resting lower as they prepare for the night. In the twilight, their silhouettes resemble a field of ancient towers, their necks arching and curving against the glow of the setting sun. And so, the neck of Apatosaurus was not just an anatomical feature, but the key to its survival. It was the bridge between body and food, the tool that allowed giants to thrive, and the emblem of a world where size was both a challenge and an answer. As we continue our journey, we will now turn our attention to the head and senses of Apatosaurus, that small but vital part of the giant, which determined how it perceived its world and interacted with the life around it. As we journey closer to the Apatosaurus, past its monumental body, vast torso, and sweeping neck, we arrive at the feature that often surprises those who first imagine this giant, its head. For all the enormity of its body, the head of Apatosaurus was remarkably small, modest, elongated, and narrow, a structure that almost seems out of proportion when compared with the living mountain that supported it. And yet, in its simplicity and efficiency, the head tells a story of adaptation, of survival, and of how a creature so vast perceived the world around it. The skull itself was long and somewhat boxy, with a jaw lined by simple chisel-shaped teeth. These teeth were not meant for chewing in the mammalian sense. Instead, they formed a tool set designed for stripping and raking vegetation. When the Apatosaurus fed, it would clamp its jaws upon a branch or frond and pull backward, its teeth shearing leaves free in great mouthfuls. Once gathered, the vegetation was swallowed largely unprocessed, sent down the long neck into the immense stomach where digestion would take over. Unlike humans or other animals with complex chewing systems, Apatosaurus relied on the sheer power of its gut, a fermentation chamber vast enough to break down the toughest plants over time. But the head of Apatosaurus was not only a feeding tool, it was also the seat of its senses, and though small compared to its body, it carried the instruments needed for navigating its Jurassic world. The eyes, set along the sides of the skull, were relatively large for the size of the head. Positioned in this way, they would have provided a wide field of vision, allowing the dinosaur to remain vigilant against predators even while grazing. It is easy to imagine an Apatosaurus standing quietly, its neck sweeping across a grove of ferns, while its eyes scanned the horizon for movement. The glint of an approaching Allosaurus, the shadow of another giant moving in the distance, the flutter of a pterosaur overhead. The vision of Apatosaurus was likely sharp enough to distinguish shapes, movement, and contrast, though perhaps not colors as vividly as mammals see them today. Some paleontologists suggest that many dinosaurs, like modern reptiles and birds, may have had vision that extended into ultraviolet ranges, allowing them to perceive patterns invisible to us. If this were true for Apatosaurus, then the world it saw would have been rich with contrasts and subtleties lost to human eyes. Ferns shimmering in hidden patterns, sunlight scattering in ways that revealed more than we could ever see. Hearing too would have been a vital sense. Though the skull was small, its structure suggests that Apatosaurus possessed inner ear canals adapted for detecting low-frequency sounds. This aligns with the idea that sauropods may have communicated with one another through deep, rumbling calls that carried across great distances. Imagine a herd of Apatosaurus spread across a valley. One individual releases a low, infrosonic rumble, its sound more felt in the chest than heard by the ears. Others respond in kind, the vibrations rolling like waves through the ground. The entire herd becomes connected in an invisible network of sound, able to coordinate movement and maintain cohesion even when separated by forests or hills. Smell, too, may have played a role in how Apatosaurus experienced its world. The nasal openings of its skull were positioned high on the head, near the eyes, and connected to air passages that may have been sensitive to scents. While it is unlikely that Apatosaurus had the refined olfactory abilities of carnivores like Allosaurus, it could still have used smell to detect the freshness of vegetation, to sense the presence of predators, or to recognize the scent of others in its herd. Imagine the air thick with the perfume of conifers, ferns, and cycads, with every gust carrying information that the dinosaur could interpret through instinct honed over millions of years. The mouth, beyond its role in feeding, also tells us something about the life of Apatosaurus. Its teeth were replaced continuously, new ones growing to replace those worn down by constant browsing. This conveyor belt of renewal ensured that the dinosaur always had sharp tools available, essential for an animal that might consume hundreds of pounds of vegetation daily. Each tooth was narrow and elongated, shaped more like a peg than a blade, making them perfect for gripping and stripping leaves but unsuited for chewing. Now consider the brain, housed within that small skull, compared to the massive body. The brain of Apatosaurus was tiny, only a few ounces in weight, about the size of a lime. To us, this may seem laughably small for such a giant, but brain size does not always correspond directly with capability. The brain of Apatosaurus was specialized for the tasks it needed most, controlling its massive body, processing sensory input, and maintaining social behaviors within its herd. It did not need to solve complex problems or use tools. Its life was shaped by rhythm and instinct, feeding, moving, reproducing, and surviving. For years, paleontologists speculated about a so-called second brain in sauropods, a theory based on an enlarged cavity found in the spinal cord region of the hips. Early researchers thought this might be an auxiliary brain, helping to control the massive body, especially the tail. Today, we know this was not a brain at all, but an expansion of the spinal cord related to nerve processing. While not an extra mind, it may have acted as a kind of processing hub, coordinating signals to and from the tail and hind legs. In a creature as large as Apatosaurus, such decentralization would have been useful, ensuring that reactions could occur quickly even when the signal had far to travel. The senses of Apatosaurus, then, were not extraordinary by themselves. Its sight, smell, and hearing were modest but sufficient. Its brain was small but efficient. What made them remarkable was how they functioned together in a body so vast, maintaining awareness, balance, and coordination in a world full of dangers. A herd of Apatosaurus moving across a plain was not a collection of lumbering beasts. It was a network of awareness, each individual perceiving the environment, communicating subtly with the others, and acting in unison to navigate the challenges of their world. Picture, for a moment, an evening in the Jurassic. The sun has set, and the stars shine brilliantly above. The herd is resting, their colossal bodies lying like mountains across the valley floor, yet the heads remain alert. Eyes gleam faintly in the starlight, ears attuned to distant rumbles. One individual senses something, the faint movement of a predator at the edge of the forest. It releases a low vibration, a sound that trembles through the ground. Others stir, heads rising, eyes turning. Without panic, without haste, the herd shifts together, their senses guiding their collective survival. It is easy, in focusing on the size of Apatosaurus, to overlook the subtlety of its adaptations. The small head, the modest brain, the simple teeth, all these might seem unremarkable, but in the context of its immense body, they were precisely what was needed. The head was light enough not to strain the neck, the teeth efficient enough to process vast amounts of food, the brain capable enough to direct the orchestration of movement, feeding, and communication. Nothing was wasted, nothing excessive. Evolution had pared the head of Apatosaurus down to essentials, and those essentials were perfectly suited for a life among giants. And so, when we look into the calm, dark eye of an Apatosaurus, we are not peering into the gaze of a thinker or a predator. We are looking into the patient awareness of a creature that lived by balance, by rhythm, by endurance. Its head was not grand, but it was enough to guide it through forests and plains, enough to sustain its appetite, enough to keep it alive in a world of both abundance and danger. As we move forward in our journey, we will step away from the anatomy of the individual and into the rhythm of its daily existence. What did a day in the life of an Apatosaurus look like? How did it pass its hours beneath the Jurassic sun, and what patterns defined its existence? Let us now follow the footsteps of giants into the flow of their days. The sun has only just begun to rise over the Jurassic horizon. Its light pours across the land in soft gold, painting the mist that lingers in valleys and wrapping the tops of conifers in radiant halos. The air is thick with warmth, and the smell of damp earth still heavy from the night's dew. Across a wide, fern-filled plain, the herds of Apatosaurus begin to stir. For these giants, each day follows a rhythm as old as their kind, a cycle of movement, feeding, and rest that sustains bodies of staggering size. As the first rays of sunlight strike their massive forms, you can hear the gentle rumble of breath escaping nostrils placed high on their heads. Slowly they rise to their feet, one colossal limb at a time, sending faint tremors through the ground. When a herd awakens, the land itself seems to shift. The first order of the day is feeding. Hunger is the quiet but constant force that shapes every waking moment of Apatosaurus. With bodies weighing over 20 tons, they must consume vast amounts of vegetation, perhaps several hundred pounds daily. And so, as the day begins, their long necks sweep downward toward beds of ferns and horsetails glistening with dew. The sound of tearing leaves fills the air as mouths strip foliage in steady rhythm. Imagine walking among them, dwarfed by legs like pillars and torsos, as wide as cottages. The ground is soft with prints pressed deep into the soil, each one large enough to cradle your entire body. Overhead, necks arc in slow unison, weaving like a living forest canopy. There is no haste, no frenzy in their feeding. Instead, there is patience, as though time itself moves differently for these giants. They do not need to rush. The land is vast, and their herds move as the vegetation requires. By mid-morning, the herd begins to shift. A low rumble passes from one individual to another, vibrations rolling invisibly through the air and soil. Slowly, as if pulled by a single thought, the herd moves toward the river. Their footsteps are steady and deliberate, a thunder softened by distance. Birds and small dinosaurs scatter ahead of them, insects rising in buzzing clouds as their enormous feet disturb the ground. The river is the lifeblood of their world. Its banks are lined with reeds, cycads, and conifers that bend toward the water, offering another banquet for the hungry herd. One by one, the Apatosaurus wade in, the cool current splashing against their legs. They dip their heads low to drink, drawing gallons of water into their vast bodies. The sound of water rushing between their jaws mingles with the creak of their immense muscles and the steady sigh of their breaths. Here at the river, the life of the herd unfolds in layers. Adults strip vegetation from trees, their necks sweeping upward into the branches. Youngsters, smaller but still massive compared to any modern animal, graze closer to the ground, learning the patterns of feeding and drinking by watching their elders. Insects crawl across their pebbly hides, birds dart among them to snatch at parasites, and pterosaurs circle overhead, drawn to the disturbance of so many giants in one place. Danger, however, is never far away. In the shadows of the forest edge, a small group of Allosaurus watchers, their eyes gleaming with predatory patience. The carnivores know that a full-grown Apatosaurus is too large, too formidable to attack directly. But among the herd are juveniles, smaller and less experienced, whose survival depends on the vigilance of the adults. A ripple of awareness passes through the group. Heads rise, necks stiffen. A deep vibration rolls from the throat of one adult, answered by others in chorus. The message is clear: predators are near. The herd responds not with panic, but with presence. They tighten their formation, the largest individuals shifting subtly to the edges, where their whip-like tails can serve as deterrents. The Allosaurus wait, pacing, gauging, but today the defense is too strong. After a long standoff, the predators slip back into the trees, their hopes of an easy kill dashed. The herd relaxes once more, their bodies returning to the slow rhythm of feeding and drinking. As midday arrives, the sun climbs high, burning away the morning mist. The land grows hot, cicadas filling the air with their constant drone. The Apatosaurus move to shaded groves, their immense bodies casting shadows like moving hills. Here, some rest, lowering their great torsos to the ground with groaning sighs of effort. Others continue to feed, stripping branches as the younger members of the herd explore under the protective gaze of adults. The afternoon stretches long. For Apatosaurus, much of the day is spent in this cycle of feeding and resting, conserving energy while sustaining their vast bulk. Occasionally, individuals shift position, their footsteps sending small creatures scurrying. A pterosaur swoops low to snatch fish from the river, its wings flashing in the sun. A group of stegosaurs wanders nearby, grazing separately but within sight of the herd. The Jurassic world is full of neighbors, each with their own rhythms, each weaving into the greater fabric of the ecosystem. As evening approaches, the light softens, painting the sky in deep reds and purples. The herd begins to move again, seeking fresh feeding grounds for the night. Their procession is slow but unstoppable. A caravan of giants stretching across the plain. Dust rises around their feet, catching the glow of the setting sun and turning the air into a haze of gold. The sound of their footsteps is steady, like a heartbeat for the land itself. Night in the Jurassic is not quiet. Insects trill, frogs croak, and the occasional call of a distant predator echoes across the valley. But among the herd, there is calm. Some Apatosaurus lie down, their bodies settling into the earth like resting mountains. Others remain standing, necks lowered, continuing to feed under the silver light of the rising moon. From time to time, a deep rumble passes through the group, rolling like distant thunder, a reminder that they are not alone, that each individual is part of something larger. To imagine sleeping near such a herd is to imagine a kind of ancient lullaby. The ground beneath you trembles faintly with their breathing. The low rumbles of their communication echo softly, resonant enough to feel in your chest. Above you, the stars burn with a brilliance unseen in the modern world, unchallenged by human lights. You close your eyes, and the rhythm of the herd becomes your rhythm, their slow breaths lulling you into rest. And this is the day in the life of Apatosaurus, a cycle of waking, feeding, moving, resting, and surviving. It is not the life of a predator, filled with sudden hunts and desperate chases, but one of constancy. It is a life shaped by scale, by endurance, by the slow pulse of a world where giants ruled the land. Tomorrow will bring much the same. The mist will rise again, the herd will stir, and the endless rhythm will continue. In this continuity lies the true strength of Apatosaurus. It was not merely a creature of size, but of persistence. A giant whose days stretched into decades, whose herd outlasted storms, predators, and seasons, and whose presence shaped the very landscapes it walked upon. As we leave the herd to their rest, we turn now to a deeper question. What role did these giants play among one another? Did they live as solitary beings, or as social creatures bound together by herd life? To answer, we must step into the world of their interactions, of their collective existence, and of the social bonds that tied these colossal beings together. When we imagine the Apatosaurus, it is easy to picture a single colossal creature striding through a Jurassic valley, its neck sweeping through the trees and its tail dragging across the ferns. But the truth of its existence was likely far more communal. Evidence from fossil trackways, bone beds, and comparisons with other sauropods suggests that Apatosaurus did not live in isolation. It moved, fed, and traveled as part of a herd, a community of giants bound together by instinct, survival, and the deep rhythms of prehistoric life. The first clues of this come from the land itself. Across regions where Apatosaurus fossils have been discovered, particularly in what is now North America, paleontologists have uncovered trackways that show parallel lines of footprints stretching across ancient floodplains. These tracks do not belong to one individual alone. Instead, they reveal groups of sauropods walking together, their steps in loose but coordinated rhythm, their paths aligned as though guided by a shared purpose. Imagine a caravan of giants, dozens strong, moving across the landscape like a living river of flesh and bone. To travel in a herd was to gain safety. Predators such as Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus were formidable hunters, but even they would have hesitated before a wall of towering bodies and whip-like tails. For a single juvenile or a weak adult, danger lurked at every forest edge. But within the protection of the herd, the vulnerable were shielded by the presence of larger, stronger companions. Much like elephants today, it is easy to picture the adults of Apatosaurus forming a protective ring around their young when danger threatened, tails raised, necks swaying, their very size a warning that few predators would dare challenge. Social bonds, however, were likely about more than just defense. To live in a herd is to live in rhythm with others, to move when they move, to feed when they feed, to rest when they rest. Picture the daily life of a herd stretched across a plain. Adults strip branches from tall conifers, their necks weaving through the canopy like colossal serpents, while juveniles graze on ferns below. The sound of tearing vegetation and the deep rumble of breath fills the air. From time to time, one individual releases a low, resonant call, a sound that trembles through the ground. Others answer in kind, their voices merging into a chorus that ties the group together. These calls may have served as reassurance, reminders that each member was part of something larger than themselves. Within such a herd there would have been a structure, though perhaps not as rigid as the hierarchies of modern pack hunters. Some individuals, older and stronger, may have naturally taken positions at the front or edges of the group, guiding movement and offering protection. Younger adults may have clustered in the center, their bodies still growing into their full size. At the heart of it all, the smallest and most vulnerable, the calves, would have found shelter, surrounded by guardians on all sides. The presence of young Apatosaurus in fossil sites offers another clue to this social life. Eggs and nesting sites of other sauropods suggest that these giants may have gathered in groups to lay clutches of eggs in communal grounds, much as sea turtles do today. Imagine a wide, sandy clearing, warmed by the Jurassic sun, where dozens of females gather. One by one, they deposit their eggs in shallow nests, covering them gently with soil and vegetation to keep them warm. The air is filled with low rumbles and the steady movement of tails. When the nesting is done, the herd moves on, leaving the eggs to incubate in the earth. Weeks or months later, the hatchlings emerge, their tiny bodies dwarfed by the landscape around them. Many will not survive, but those that do may find safety by joining the herd, their lives bound to the giants that came before them. But herd life was not only about survival and reproduction, it was also about connection, a shared experience of existence that made life among giants possible. To move in a herd was to be surrounded at all times by sound and presence, the low vibrations of calls, the steady thunder of footsteps, the brush of tails against the ground. For an individual Apatosaurus, solitude was rare. Instead, life was lived in the company of others, a constant awareness of being part of a greater whole. This communal life would also have shaped how Apatosaurus interacted with the landscape. A single giant could strip a grove of trees bare in hours, a herd could transform an entire valley. As they moved together, they altered the flow of vegetation, opening paths through forests, fertilizing the soil with their droppings, and creating opportunities for smaller creatures to thrive in their wake. Just as elephants shaped the savannas of Africa today, Apatosaurus herds shaped the Jurassic plains, their collective presence a force of ecological engineering. And yet, despite their scale, there would have been moments of intimacy among these giants. Picture two adults lowering their necks side by side to feed, their bodies brushing gently as they strip leaves from the same tree. Or imagine a calf nudging against the flank of its mother, seeking reassurance in the steady warmth of her presence. Perhaps individuals recognized one another through sound or scent, their low rumbles carrying unique tones that identified them within the chorus of the herd. In times of migration, these bonds would have been even more crucial. When drought struck or vegetation grew scarce, herds may have been forced to travel long distances in search of new feeding grounds. Such journeys would have tested their endurance, but together they could cross rivers, climb ridges, and traverse open plains. Fossil trackways suggest herds moving in lines, the young positioned safely in the middle, the adults guiding them forward. Imagine walking beside them as they march beneath the blazing Jurassic sun, their necks swaying, their tails sweeping, the land trembling with every step. As night fell, the herd would gather close, their bodies forming a loose circle. The calves would settle among the adults, while some individuals remained standing, watchful against the possibility of predators. The low rumble of communication would ripple through the group, a constant reminder of presence, a reassurance that even in the darkness, none were alone. The social life of Apatosaurus, then, was not defined by complexity in the way primates or humans understand it. It was defined by rhythm, by movement, by the bonds of proximity and survival. It was a life in which every individual contributed to the strength of the group, and the group in turn gave protection and stability to each member. To drift to sleep near such a herd is to feel not just the presence of giants, but the presence of community. The deep rumbles that pass through the ground are not random sounds, but voices of reassurance. The silhouettes that move slowly in the moonlight are not solitary shapes, but parts of a greater whole. In their company, one feels both small and safe, a reminder that survival, even in the age of giants, was never a solitary endeavor. As we leave this vision of herd life behind, our journey now turns to the next generation. How did Apatosaurus bring new life into the world? What role did reproduction play in the rhythm of these herds? And how did the young survive in a world filled with danger? To answer, we must follow the path of eggs, nests, and hatchlings into the story of the next generation. The story of Apatosaurus is not only one of immense size and survival in the face of predators, but also one of continuity, of how a creature so vast carried its kind forward across millions of years. To understand this part of its life, we must imagine the most fragile and vulnerable stage of existence, the beginning. Reproduction for a creature as large as Apatosaurus was not simple, yet nature had found its way. Like all dinosaurs, Apatosaurus laid eggs. These were not the gargantuan eggs you might expect from an animal weighing more than 20 tons, but relatively modest in size, perhaps about the size of a football or slightly larger. To us, they may appear surprisingly small when compared to the body that produced them, but this was part of the evolutionary strategy. Laying many smaller eggs increased the chances that some would survive, ensuring that at least a portion of the clutch would make it to adulthood. Picture then a wide sandy clearing beneath the open sky, warmed by the Jurassic sun. This is a nesting ground, chosen by instinct, perhaps near a riverbank where the soil is soft and easy to dig. Here, a group of female Apatosaurus gathers, slowly, with tails swaying and heads raised in constant awareness of predators. They begin the process of creating nests. Using their massive limbs and tails, they scrape shallow pits into the soil. One by one, eggs are deposited into these cradles of earth. The scene is both immense and intimate. Colossal bodies towering above, yet each engaged in the delicate act of placing fragile shells into the ground. Once laid, the eggs are covered with soil, sand, and vegetation. The Earth itself becomes an incubator, warmed by the sun during the day and held by its insulating layers through the night. The mothers do not sit upon their eggs as birds do today. Their bodies would crush them under such weight. Instead, they trust the Earth to provide warmth and protection, a strategy that worked for millions of years. Weeks pass. The herd moves on, leaving the nests behind. For modern humans, this may seem a strange abandonment, but it was the way of sauropods. The adults could not linger in one place for too long. Their enormous appetites demanded constant movement to find fresh feeding grounds. The eggs were left to the care of the soil, guarded only by chance and the resilience of life itself. In time, the eggs begin to stir. From within the shells, tiny forms push and struggle, breaking free into the light of the Jurassic world. Compared to their parents, they are impossibly small, hatchlings perhaps only 2 feet long, weighing no more than a few pounds. They emerge into a world where danger lurks at every shadow. Predators, from small theropods to larger hunters like Ceratosaurus, see the hatchlings as easy prey. Even natural hazards such as flooding rivers or sudden storms can sweep away entire clutches. The mortality rate is high, and yet survival depends on numbers. From a clutch of dozens, only a few may grow to adulthood, but those few carry the lineage forward. The survivors grow quickly, fueled by the abundant vegetation around them. Their bones elongate, their muscles thicken, and within a few short years they outpace the predators that once threatened them. Growth was their greatest weapon, to become too large, too fast for most hunters to manage. But were the young entirely left on their own? This remains a question of debate. Some paleontologists suggest that hatchlings lived independently from birth, scattering into the underbrush to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Others propose that young sauropods may have joined herds, protected within the circle of adults as they grew. Imagine, if you will, a small calf, pressing close to its mother's towering leg, dwarfed by her size but comforted by her presence. Around it, other calves move in a loose cluster, watched over by a ring of adult bodies and swinging tails. The herd becomes not just a feeding unit, but a living shield against the hazards of the Jurassic. Whether independent or nurtured within herds, the journey of a juvenile Apatosaurus was perilous. Fossil evidence suggests that many never reached maturity, their bones scattered in predator dens or washed into rivers, but those who endured entered into a life of steady growth. Each year their bodies expanded, their necks lengthened, and their weight increased by thousands of pounds. From fragile hatchling to unstoppable giant, the transformation was one of the most dramatic in the natural world. Consider the patience of this growth. It may have taken a decade or more for an Apatosaurus to reach its full adult size. During these years, the young lived in a world where they were neither entirely safe nor entirely vulnerable. They were too large for smaller predators, but still attractive targets for larger ones. Their survival depended upon caution, awareness, and when possible, the protection of the herd. Reproduction, then, was not simply an act of laying eggs. It was a gamble played out against the odds of nature. Each generation depended upon the survival of only a few individuals, yet across millions of years, those few were enough. The presence of Apatosaurus fossils in abundance tells us that despite the dangers, their strategy succeeded. They endured, they thrived, and they left behind a legacy of bones that still speak to us today. Now imagine standing at the edge of a nesting ground. The earth is dotted with shallow mounds, each one concealing eggs warmed by the sun. Tiny movements ripple the soil as hatchlings stir beneath. One breaks free, its shell cracking open to reveal a creature no larger than a rabbit, its skin soft, its movements uncertain. Around it, others follow, a chorus of new life emerging into the ancient world. Their calls are high-pitched, almost squeaks, a far cry from the deep rumbles of their elders. They scatter quickly, instinct driving them into cover, into the safety of ferns and brush. A few remain exposed, and in moments a shadow falls across them. A small theropod lunges, seizing one in its jaws. The rest vanish into the undergrowth. their survival dependent upon speed and luck. It is a sobering scene, a reminder that for every giant that walked the land, countless more never reached maturity. And yet, the cycle continued. Generation after generation, the eggs were laid, the hatchlings emerged, the young grew, and some endured to join the ranks of the herd. In this way, Apatosaurus persisted through the ages, not by protecting every offspring, but by ensuring that enough survived to sustain the lineage. For the adults, reproduction was not a yearly act, but one woven into the rhythm of their lives. Perhaps once every few years, when conditions were right, the herds would gather at nesting grounds, their low rumbles filling the air as they laid the foundations for the next generation. These gatherings may have been moments of social significance, times when separate herds converged, exchanged members, and reinforced the bonds of their kind. The continuity of life for Apatosaurus was not marked by the care of individuals as in mammals, but by the endurance of the herd as a whole. Each generation flowed into the next, a river of life carried forward not by the survival of every calf but by the persistence of enough. And through this, Apatosaurus endured for millions of years, its lineage stretching across time in a chain unbroken until the close of the Jurassic. To imagine this is to understand the fragility and resilience of life at once. The eggs so small, the hatchlings so vulnerable, and yet the adults so immense, so steady. The beginning was fraught with peril, but the destination was one of majesty, a creature that would walk the earth as a living mountain, its every step reshaping the land beneath it. As we close this chapter on reproduction and the next generation, we turn now to the challenges that even giants faced once grown. For though Apatosaurus was immense, it was not invulnerable. Predators prowled the shadows, and survival, even for a titan, demanded vigilance and strength. For all its size and majesty, the Apatosaurus was not invincible. Even the greatest of the Jurassic giants had enemies lurking in the shadows, predators whose sharp teeth and cunning minds made them formidable hunters. To live as an Apatosaurus was to live in a world where danger was ever present, a reminder that size, though powerful, was never an absolute shield against the constant struggle for survival. The most feared of these predators was the Allosaurus, the apex carnivore of the late Jurassic. With a body stretching more than 30 feet and jaws lined with serrated teeth, it was a hunter built for speed, strength, and strategy. Where Apatosaurus embodied endurance and stability, Allosaurus embodied precision and violence. Its eyes, forward-facing, suggested binocular vision, granting it depth perception for targeting prey. Its limbs were strong, its claws sharp, and its skull capable of delivering slashing bites that could tear through flesh. To imagine an encounter between these two giants is to imagine a battle of contrasts. On one side, the colossal bulk of Apatosaurus, weighing over 20 tons, its whip-like tail coiled with potential energy, its sheer size enough to intimidate most would-be attackers. On the other side, the leaner, faster, more agile Allosaurus, often hunting not alone but in groups, using cooperation to bring down prey far larger than themselves. Picture, if you will, a quiet Jurassic afternoon. The herd of Apatosaurus grazes along the edge of a river, their necks swaying through the canopy as they strip conifer branches and ferns. The air is thick with the hum of insects, the distant cries of pterosaurs, and the steady rumble of giants feeding. Yet in the shadows of the forest, movement stirs. A trio of Allosaurus emerges, their heads low, their bodies tense, eyes fixed upon the herd. They do not aim for the towering adults. Not yet. Instead, their gaze lingers on a juvenile at the edge of the group, smaller, less protected, its legs still growing into their full strength. The herd senses something. A deep rumble passes from one Apatosaurus to another, traveling not only through the air but through the ground itself. Heads rise, tails sway, and the herd begins to cluster. The largest adults shift their bodies outward, creating a living barrier of muscle and bone around the vulnerable calves. The tails, long and whip-like, sway slowly at first, then more sharply, slicing the air with menacing precision. The Allosaurus pause, gauging the risk. Here lies the genius of Apatosaurus's survival strategy. Its greatest weapon was not claws or teeth, but size combined with cooperation. Alone, even a giant could be harried, distracted, and worn down by persistent hunters. But in a herd, their collective presence was nearly impenetrable. To approach was to risk being struck by a tail moving at astonishing speed, perhaps fast enough to break bone or deliver a fatal blow. Some paleontologists believe these tails could crack like whips, producing sounds loud enough to startle predators or communicate across distances. Whether as weapon or warning, the tail was a deterrent no predator could ignore. And yet, predators are persistent. Allosaurus was no fool. When hunger pressed and opportunities arose, they would strike. A sick or injured Apatosaurus, lagging behind the herd, might find itself vulnerable. A young calf momentarily separated from its protectors could become a target. Imagine the chaos of such a moment, the herd rumbling in alarm, adults shifting, tails lashing, dust rising in clouds as predators dart in with snapping jaws. The young cry out, high-pitched and desperate, as hunters circle. Perhaps the adults succeed in driving them away, their tails whistling through the air in terrifying arcs. Or perhaps the predator's persistence pays off, and one calf is dragged down, the herd forced to leave it behind, as the cycle of life plays out in harsh inevitability. Predators, however, were not the only threat to Apatosaurus. The natural world posed dangers of its own. Storms could transform peaceful valleys into raging floods, sweeping away the young and the weak. Droughts could wither the land, leaving herds to travel vast distances in search of food and water, their bodies weakened by hunger and thirst. Disease, parasites, and injuries from falls or clashes with rivals may also have claimed individuals. For a creature so large, even a broken limb could prove fatal, as its weight would prevent proper healing. And yet, despite these challenges, Apatosaurus endured. Its very body was a fortress. The thickness of its hide protected it from minor injuries and bites. Its immense size made it nearly untouchable once full-grown. Few predators dared to confront an adult directly. Its tail, both balance and weapon, served as a final line of defense. Most of all, its strategy of living in herds ensured that survival was not left to chance. Together, they were strong. Think again of the predators. For every attempt, there was risk. To face an Apatosaurus was to face a creature whose kick could crush bone, whose tail could shatter ribs, whose sheer weight could turn a predator into nothing more than a smear upon the earth. Allosaurus may have been brave, but it was also cautious. It would not waste energy on hopeless battles. Instead, it sought the weak, the isolated, the young. The survival of Apatosaurus lay not only in its defenses but in its ability to protect the vulnerable long enough for them to grow. There is also the question of behavior. Did Apatosaurus ever use its tail in combat against predators, or was its defense primarily deterrence? Fossil evidence of broken or scarred bones in predators suggests that sauropods did sometimes fight back, delivering injuries that could cripple or even kill. To imagine such a moment is to picture an Allosaurus lunging at the flank of a juvenile, only to be met with the whip crack of a tail striking with the force of thunder. Bones snap, the predator reels, and the herd presses forward, their combined strength forcing the attackers to retreat. Survival, in such moments, was won not by speed or cunning but by sheer power and unity. But survival was not always about confrontation. Sometimes it was about awareness, about sensing danger before it struck. The low rumbles of Apatosaurus, carried across the ground, may have served not only as communication within the herd, but as an early warning system. A predator spotted at the edge of the forest could be signaled to the group in an instant, the vibrations rolling like invisible threads through the earth. In this way, even the most silent approach of a hunter was foiled by the communal awareness of giants. Night brought its own perils. In the darkness, predators were emboldened, relying on stealth to approach. Yet the herd did not scatter. They gathered close, their massive bodies forming a wall around the young. Some may have remained standing while others rested, their senses attuned to the slightest tremor of approaching footsteps. To sleep in the company of Apatosaurus was to sleep in the safest place the Jurassic could offer, within the circle of giants, guarded by tails, weight, and vigilance. In the grand balance of the late Jurassic, predators and prey existed in a dynamic tension. The Allosaurus needed the Apatosaurus for sustenance, while the Apatosaurus shaped the strategies and behavior of the predators. Without the giants, the hunters would starve. Without the hunters, the herds would grow unchecked, reshaping the land beyond balance. Together they formed an ancient equilibrium, a dance of survival written into the very fabric of the ecosystem. For the Apatosaurus, survival was not about defeating every threat. It was about enduring, about living long enough, growing large enough, and reproducing in numbers sufficient to outlast the constant pressure of predation. And endure they did. For millions of years, Apatosaurus herds roamed the Jurassic plains, their survival strategies honed by time, their presence a testament to resilience. To imagine their world is to imagine a place of constant vigilance, yet also of immense calm. The herd grazes beneath the sun, tails swaying, necks sweeping, their movements slow and steady. At the forest's edge, predators watch and wait, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Yet most of the time, no battle comes. The deterrence of giants is enough. The balance is maintained. Life flows on. And so, survival for Apatosaurus was not a tale of constant struggle, but of steady presence. They were not warriors, but towers of endurance relying on their sheer size, their unity, and their patience to withstand the dangers of their age. As we leave the shadow of predators behind, our journey now turns outward once more to consider the neighbors of Apatosaurus, the other creatures that shared its world, shaping and being shaped by the presence of giants. The world of Apatosaurus was not one of isolation. Though these giants dominated the Jurassic plains and forests with their sheer size, they lived among a vibrant community of other creatures. The late Jurassic was an age of diversity, where countless forms of life thrived side by side, their lives interwoven in a tapestry of survival, competition, and coexistence. To understand Apatosaurus fully, we must step beyond its immense shadow and look at the neighbors who shared its world. Let us begin with the other giants of its kind, the sauropods. Apatosaurus was not the only long-necked herbivore to roam these lands. Alongside it walked Diplodocus, with its even longer neck and whip-like tail, a cousin of Apatosaurus yet distinct in form and feeding style. Where Apatosaurus had a robust frame and thick bones, Diplodocus was more slender, its neck extending farther into the canopy, its tail stretching like a ribbon behind it. To see both herds together would be to witness two variations on a single theme, both colossal, both magnificent, yet each adapted to slightly different ecological roles. Diplodocus may have fed more on low vegetation, sweeping its head near the ground, while Apatosaurus reached both mid-level plants and higher branches. In this way, they avoided direct competition, dividing the land's bounty between them. Then there was Camarasaurus, shorter-necked but heavily built, with teeth shaped more for grinding than stripping. Camarasaurus may have focused on tougher vegetation, feeding in areas where Apatosaurus and Diplodocus did not. These sauropods together formed a community of titans, each species carving out its niche, each shaping the land in its own way. When herds of these giants crossed paths, the ground must have shaken with their combined weight, the valleys echoing with the rumbles of dozens upon dozens of necks sweeping through the foliage. But sauropods were not the only herbivores here. The stegosaurids, with their iconic plates and spiked tails, grazed among the cycads and ferns. Stegosaurus, perhaps the most famous of them, stood much smaller than Apatosaurus, yet still impressive in its own right. Its back was lined with tall, diamond-shaped plates that may have helped regulate body temperature or served as display structures. At its rear, the deadly Thagomizer, four long spikes, served as a deterrent to predators. To see a herd of Stegosaurus moving among the feet of Apatosaurus would have been to witness a striking contrast. The low, armored grazers beneath the towering necks of the giants, both feeding from the same land but in different ways. Smaller still were the ornithopods, agile two-legged plant-eaters such as Dryosaurus. These swift creatures darted through the undergrowth, their speed and awareness their only defense against predators. For them, the herds of Apatosaurus may have offered more than intimidation. Moving alongside the giants could provide protection, as predators would be hesitant to approach a cluster of sauropods. Dryosaurus and its kin may have fed on vegetation stirred up or exposed by the trampling feet of the giants, opportunists thriving in the wake of colossi. Predators, too, filled this world in abundance. Chief among them was Allosaurus, the apex hunter whose shadow loomed over every herbivore. But there were others: Ceratosaurus, with its distinctive horn upon its snout, a powerful hunter that stalked riversides and forests, and Torvosaurus, another fearsome theropod, with jaws strong enough to tackle sizable prey. These carnivores, though deadly, were also essential, keeping populations of herbivores in check and preventing the land from being stripped bare too quickly. The balance between predator and prey was delicate, a constant interplay that ensured the health of the ecosystem. Nor were dinosaurs the only neighbors of Apatosaurus. The skies above were alive with the leathery wings of pterosaurs. Species such as Pterodactylus and Rhamphorhynchus soared over rivers and plains, their sharp eyes scanning for fish or carrion. At times they may have gathered around sauropod herds, waiting for scraps left behind by predators or for insects stirred up by the giant's passage. Imagine the scene: a herd of Apatosaurus moving across a valley, accompanied above by a flock of pterosaurs, their wings flashing in the sunlight like banners carried by the wind. The waters, too, were full of life. Rivers teemed with fish, amphibians, and crocodile-like reptiles such as Goniophilis, whose long jaws snapped at anything foolish enough to stray too close. Turtles paddled slowly through the shallows, their shells glistening under the sun. Insects, in numbers almost unimaginable, swarmed across the wetlands, buzzing clouds that filled the air with constant hums and flashes of movement. To the Apatosaurus, these creatures were of little concern, but they were part of the same world, contributing to the richness of its environment. Even the plants themselves were neighbors of a sort, shaping and being shaped by the creatures that fed upon them. Conifers towered over the land, their needle-like leaves forming dense canopies. Cycads and Benitellas grew in clusters, their stiff fronds rising like spiky crowns. Ferns spread carpets across the forest floor, their delicate fronds unfurling beneath the shade. Horsetails grew in dense thickets along riverbanks, their hollow stems whispering as the wind passed through them. Each of these plants was part of the diet of Apatosaurus, and each had adapted over millions of years to survive in a world where giants stripped them by the ton. Some grew quickly, able to recover after being cropped. Others spread seeds or spores that traveled far, carried by wind, water, or the very giants that consumed them. The interaction between Apatosaurus and its neighbors was not always one of competition or predation. Often it was symbiotic, subtle, and indirect. By trampling paths through forests, Apatosaurus created corridors that smaller animals could use. By stripping trees of branches, it opened sunlight to the undergrowth, encouraging new growth for other herbivores. By defecating in massive quantities, it fertilized the soil, spreading nutrients across the land. In this way, the very act of living by Apatosaurus shaped the environment for countless other species. Imagine walking across a Jurassic valley at midday. Ahead, a herd of Apatosaurus feeds near the river, their long necks sweeping in rhythm. At their feet, a group of Dryosaurus darts nervously among the ferns, quick and alert. Nearby, a pair of Stegosaurus graze, their plates catching the sunlight, their tails swaying defensively. Overhead, a flock of pterosaurs circles, their cries sharp and shrill against the hum of insects. Across the river, in the shadows, The outline of an Allosaurus moves, its body half concealed among the trees, and beneath it all, the plants themselves stretch toward the sun, feeding, growing, and waiting to be eaten. This was the world of Apatosaurus, not empty, not silent, but full of neighbors, each living their own story in the same ancient landscape. What emerges from this vision is not the image of a single species ruling the land, but of a community of life in balance. Apatosaurus was central, yes, but it was only one part of a vast web of existence. Its neighbors shaped its life as much as it shaped theirs. To live as a giant was to live among diversity, in a world where every plant and creature had its place. As night fell over this world, the balance continued. The giants lay down to rest, their breaths rising in clouds against the moonlight. Stegosaurs settled into the shadows, their plates glowing faintly under starlight. The swift Drysaurus hid among the ferns, their bodies pressed low, listening for danger. Predators prowled, their eyes glinting in the darkness, waiting for opportunity. Above, the pterosaurs circled against the moon, their wings whispering as they glided silently through the sky. It was a world alive at every scale, from the insects in the soil to the giants that towered over the land. And through it all, Apatosaurus endured, not alone, but as part of this vast interconnected community. Its life was bound to the lives of its neighbors, its survival tied to the balance of the ecosystem. To walk with Apatosaurus was to walk in a world filled with company, a reminder that even the mightiest of creatures are never truly alone. As we leave behind this portrait of neighbors, we turn to something more mysterious. Beyond what they saw and ate and endured, how did Apatosaurus communicate with one another? What sounds did they make? And how did they carry their voices across the plains? To answer, we must listen for the echoes of giants, the deep and resonant calls of the Apatosaurus. If you close your eyes and picture a herd of Apatosaurus moving across a Jurassic plain, it is easy to imagine the sights, the swaying necks, the dust rising beneath colossal feet, the silhouettes stretching across the horizon. But what about the sounds? What voices did these giants give to their world? Did they thunder with roars, or did they murmur in low rumbles that rolled like distant storms? Though the fossil record cannot give us recordings, clues from anatomy, modern analogues, and scientific study allow us to paint a picture of what the sound of Apatosaurus might have been. The first clue lies in the shape of its skull and air passages. Unlike mammals whose vocalizations emerge from larynxes, many dinosaurs, like birds, their closest living relatives, may have used structures called syrinxes, or at least similar arrangements of soft tissue, to produce sound. While direct fossil evidence of a syrinx is yet to be found in sauropods, the placement of their nasal openings high on the head suggests that air passed through complex chambers before leaving the body. These chambers may have deepened or amplified their calls, much as a resonating drum enriches a beat. If this is true, the sounds of Apatosaurus may not have been sharp or high-pitched. Instead, they were likely low, resonant, and powerful. Imagine a deep vibration that you feel in your chest and bones more than you hear with your ears. A sound like rolling thunder or the seismic hum of the earth itself. Such infrasonic communication, too low for human ears to register clearly, may have been the language of giants. Why low sounds? Because low frequency calls travel farther. Across the open plains of the Jurassic, a deep rumble could carry for miles, allowing herds to communicate even when separated by forests or valleys. One Apatosaurus could call to another, and the sound would ripple across the land, reaching its companions with little distortion. This ability would have been vital for keeping herds together, for coordinating movement, or for warning of predators. Picture a herd resting under the stars. The night is alive with the hum of insects and the distant cries of smaller dinosaurs. Suddenly, one Apatosaurus lifts its head and releases a low, rolling call. The sound trembles through the ground, passing beneath your feet like a hidden river. A moment later, another answers, then another, until the entire herd hums with resonance. To stand within such a chorus would be to feel yourself inside the heartbeat of the earth. But not all sounds needed to be so grand. Close communication within the herd may have taken subtler forms, soft grunts, sighs, or low moans exchanged between individuals. Mothers may have called gently to calves, guiding them with murmurs that reassured and instructed. Calves, in turn, may have squeaked or chirped, their smaller bodies producing higher sounds that stood out against the deeper voices of adults. In this way, the herd became a symphony of voices, layered in pitch and tone, each note carrying meaning. Then there is the tail, another possible source of sound. Scientists have speculated that the whip-like tails of Apatosaurus and its relatives could be swung with such force that the tips may have broken the sound barrier, producing a sharp crack like a gunshot. Whether this was truly possible remains debated, but even without supersonic speed, a lashing tail would have produced dramatic whooshes and snaps, audible warnings that predators would not ignore. In this way, sound was not only a tool of communication but of defense, a non-lethal signal that danger would be met with force. Think also of the environmental sounds tied to their movements. The steady thump of colossal feet upon the earth, the rustling of ferns and branches stripped by teeth, the creak of tendons and muscles shifting under skin, all these were part of the daily soundscape of Apatosaurus. To live among them was to live in constant awareness of these background noises, a low chorus of life that blended creature and landscape into one. We can also look to modern analogues for hints. Elephants, the giants of today, communicate through infrasonic rumbles that can travel for miles. They use these sounds to coordinate movements, locate one another, and reinforce social bonds. Could Apatosaurus have done the same? The parallels are striking. Both are massive herbivores, both live in herds, and both need long-distance communication to maintain cohesion. If elephants today use rumbles as a language of giants, it is not difficult to imagine Apatosaurus doing the same 150 million years ago. Birds, too, offer comparisons. Many large birds, like ostriches and emus, produce deep booming calls using resonating chambers in their throats and chests. These sounds can be felt as much as heard, traveling through the ground to reach companions. Sauropods, with their enormous air sacs and elongated tracheae, may have amplified their calls in similar ways. Their voices then were not only sounds in the air but tremors in the earth, communication woven into the very landscape. The role of sound in their social lives may have been profound. Calls could signal movement, one individual rumbling to indicate it was time to shift feeding grounds, with others following the cue. Calls could signal danger, a sudden urgent vibration alerting the herd to predators. Calls could signal reassurance. Deep, rhythmic tones passed between adults as they surrounded their calves. Even mating may have been accompanied by vocal displays, with males producing resonant booms to attract females or to assert dominance over rivals. Imagine, then, the full soundscape of a Jurassic plain at dusk. The wind stirs through the conifers, insects buzz in thick clouds, and pterosaurs screech overhead. In the distance, a predator roars, sharp and piercing, a sound meant to startle and intimidate. Yet closer, deeper, and more enduring comes the voice of Apatosaurus. A low, rolling bellow spreads across the valley, echoed by others until the ground itself hums with their presence. To be near it is to feel both small and safe, enfolded in the company of giants whose voices knit the herd together. For those drifting to sleep beside such sounds, the effect would be mesmerizing. The rumbles pass through your body like the rhythm of a great drum, steady, calming, ancient. The chorus of the herd is not violent or chaotic, but harmonious, each voice blending with the others into a vast resonance. You close your eyes, and the vibrations become part of your heartbeat, carrying you deeper into dreams. The sound of giants, then, was not just noise. It was language, defense, reassurance, and presence. It was a way for Apatosaurus to assert itself in the world, to connect with its kind, and to shape the landscape, not only with its feet and teeth, but with its voice. Though we may never hear it directly, we can imagine it, a sound deeper than thunder, older than memory, rolling across the plains of the Jurassic, like the song of the earth itself. As we leave behind these echoes, our journey now turns from sound to silence, from speculation about what Apatosaurus may have said, to the story of how humans first began to listen. In the next part of our journey, we will step forward millions of years to the age of discovery, when bones pulled from the earth revealed the forgotten presence of these giants. For millions of years after the last Apatosaurus herds walked the Jurassic plains, their bones lay buried in silence. Layer upon layer of sediment covered them, rivers shifting their courses, mountains rising and falling, time pressing down with unrelenting patience. The echoes of their footsteps faded into the earth, leaving only fossils, petrified reminders of giants waiting to be discovered. It was not until the late 19th century, during a time of fierce scientific rivalry, this period has come to be known as the Bone Wars, an age of discovery and competition when paleontologists raced against one another to find, describe and claim ownership of the greatest fossil treasures of North America. At the heart of this rivalry were two men, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, both brilliant, both ambitious, and both determined to outdo the other. They sent teams of fossil hunters across the American West into the exposed landscapes of Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, where the Jurassic rocks of the Morrison Formation held secrets of unimaginable size. What began as a search for knowledge often devolved into personal vendettas, with accusations of theft, sabotage, and even the deliberate destruction of fossils to keep them from rivals. It was in this climate of competition that Apatosaurus was first uncovered. In 1877, Marsh described fossils found in Colorado as belonging to a new genus, which he named Apatosaurus, meaning deceptive lizard. The name came from the unusual chevron bones on its tail, which looked different from those of other dinosaurs then known. To Marsh, this strangeness suggested a deceptive appearance, though he could not yet imagine the full creature behind the bones. The skeleton he described was incomplete, and as was common at the time, paleontologists filled in the missing pieces with assumptions. Without complete skulls, Marsh and others struggled to determine what the head of Apatosaurus looked like. In their eagerness to reconstruct these giants, they sometimes placed the wrong skulls on the wrong bodies, creating chimeras that would mislead science for decades. Just 2 years later, in 1879, Marsh named another sauropod from similar rocks. This one he called Brontosaurus, or thunder lizard. The name captured the imagination, evoking the image of a giant whose footsteps shook the earth. To the public, it was a name of power and myth, a name that would outlive many of Marsh's other discoveries. But there was a problem. Later studies revealed that Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus were not truly separate. The differences Marsh had seen were too minor to justify two genera. According to the rules of scientific naming, the older name took precedence, and so the creature long celebrated as Brontosaurus was, in fact, Apatosaurus. The thunder lizard had been renamed the deceptive lizard, and the beloved Brontosaurus was declared invalid. For scientists, this was clear, but for the public, it was confusing. Museums around the world had already displayed reconstructions of Brontosaurus, complete with dramatic skeletons and striking murals. Textbooks, newspapers, and popular culture had embraced the name. To many, it felt as though science had stolen something majestic, replacing thunder with deception. Even today, the name Brontosaurus lingers in the public imagination, sometimes stronger than Apatosaurus itself. Adding to the confusion were the skulls. For decades, the mounted skeletons of Apatosaurus in museums wore the wrong heads. Paleontologists, unsure of the proper skull, placed those of other sauropods, particularly Camarasaurus, onto Apatosaurus bodies. These broad, blunt skulls gave the giants a look quite different from what we now believe to be accurate. It was not until the mid-20th century, after further discoveries and comparisons, that scientists realized Apatosaurus likely had a narrower, more diplodocus-like skull with peg-like teeth suited for stripping vegetation. By then, generations of museum visitors had grown up seeing the wrong face atop the right body. The mistakes did not end there. Reconstructions of posture and movement also shifted over time. In early depictions, Apatosaurus was imagined as a swamp-dwelling creature, too heavy to support its own weight on land. Artists painted it wallowing in rivers, half submerged like a massive reptilian hippo, its long neck held above the water as it grazed on aquatic plants. This vision of a sluggish, water-bound giant dominated public thought for decades. Only later, with better understanding of biomechanics, did scientists recognize that Apatosaurus was perfectly capable of life on land, striding across plains and valleys with confidence. These early misunderstandings are not failures but reminders of how science works. Knowledge is not fixed but grows and changes as new evidence comes to light. Each bone uncovered, each fossil analyzed, each comparison made brings us closer to the truth, even if it means revising what we thought we knew. Apatosaurus, like many dinosaurs, has been shaped as much by human imagination as by fossil evidence. Its story is one of discovery, correction, and rediscovery, an ongoing dialogue between stone and science. And yet, despite the corrections, the myths persist. Brontosaurus, the thunder lizard, still roams the imagination, and in a way, science has come full circle. In 2015, a new study suggested that Brontosaurus may indeed be distinct from Apatosaurus after all, based on subtle differences in their bones. The debate continues, with some paleontologists accepting Brontosaurus as valid once again, and others maintaining it as a synonym. For the public, this only deepens the legend. The thunder lizard refuses to be silenced, its name echoing alongside Apatosaurus in the halls of science and story alike. Consider the experience of a visitor walking into a museum in the early 20th century. Before them stands a mounted skeleton unlike anything they have ever seen. A body stretching 70 feet, a neck reaching out into space, a tail sweeping behind. The sign may call it Brontosaurus. The head may be incorrect, the posture outdated, yet none of that matters in the moment. What matters is the feeling of awe, the sudden recognition that the world once held giants. In that awe lies the enduring truth of Apatosaurus, regardless of the name on the plaque. The early misunderstandings also reveal something deeper about human nature. We long to name, to classify, to understand, but we also long to imagine, to fill in the gaps with stories that make sense to us. When Marsh named Apatosaurus deceptive, he could not have known how fitting the name would become, the creature whose very identity would shift and deceive across generations of discovery. And when he named Brontosaurus thunder lizard, he tapped into something mythic, a resonance that would outlast the details of classification. Today, as we look back on this history, we can smile at the mistakes while appreciating the progress. We know now that Apatosaurus was not a swamp dweller, but a land-roaming giant. We know its skull was narrow and its teeth suited for stripping plants. We know it lived in herds, communicated with deep rumbles, and thrived across the Jurassic landscape. But we also honor the journey of discovery that brought us here, the curiosity and passion of those who first unearthed its bones. To stand beside an Apatosaurus fossil today is to stand not only with a dinosaur but with history itself, the history of life, and the history of human understanding. The bones whisper of ancient worlds, but they also whisper of the men and women who carried them from stone, argued over their meaning, and placed them in the light for all to see. And so, the story of Apatosaurus is not only a story of a dinosaur, but of us, of our quest to know the past, of our mistakes, our rivalries, our corrections, and our endless wonder at the giants who came before us. As we leave behind this tale of discovery and misunderstanding, we step now into the modern era, where new technologies and fresh insights continue to reshape our vision of Apatosaurus. What does science today tell us about this giant? How do scans, models, and experiments breathe new life into bones that have lain silent for eons? The bones of Apatosaurus have been known to science for nearly a century and a half, but in many ways we are only just beginning to understand this giant. Where early paleontologists worked with incomplete skeletons, educated guesses, and the limitations of their time, modern researchers bring an entirely new set of tools. With advanced imaging, biomechanical modeling, and comparisons to living relatives, the picture of Apatosaurus is sharper, more dynamic, and far more fascinating than we once believed. One of the most important breakthroughs has come through the study of its bones with modern technology. Using CT scanning, scientists can peer inside fossils without damaging them, revealing structures invisible to the naked eye. When paleontologists applied these scans to Apatosaurus vertebrae, they discovered an intricate network of air sacs within the bones, hollow chambers that lightened the skeleton while maintaining strength. This discovery confirmed what earlier researchers had suspected, that Apatosaurus, like modern birds, possessed a respiratory system that extended into its bones, allowing for efficient oxygen exchange and reducing the weight of its colossal frame. This insight transforms the way we think about the giant. No longer must we imagine it as an impossibly heavy, lumbering brute. Instead, Apatosaurus becomes an animal of balance and efficiency, its immense size made possible not by brute force alone but by careful adaptation. The air-filled bones tell us that this was a creature designed for endurance, able to carry its massive neck and tail without exhausting itself, able to walk miles each day in search of food and water. Biomechanics has added further depth to this picture. By creating digital models of the skeleton and overlaying them with estimates of muscle and ligament placement, scientists can simulate how Apatosaurus moved. The results suggest a gait that was steady and deliberate, with each step carefully supported by its column-like legs. Its stride was not clumsy but efficient, covering ground at a pace that, while not fast, was unrelenting. Some models even suggest that Apatosaurus could rear up on its hind legs, using its tail as a tripod to reach higher branches, a possibility that makes its already impressive feeding range even broader. The neck itself, long the subject of debate, has also been re-evaluated. Early reconstructions often depicted Apatosaurus with its neck held like a swan, arcing gracefully upward. Later studies suggested a more horizontal posture, with the neck extending outward rather than upward. Recent biomechanical work has shown that while the neck was not as flexible as a snake's, it did have considerable range of motion, allowing Apatosaurus to feed at multiple levels without moving its massive body. This versatility may have been one of its greatest strengths, enabling it to exploit food sources unavailable to other herbivores. Even the tail has been revisited with modern science. Computer simulations indicate that the whip-like tails of Apatosaurus and its relatives could be swung with incredible speed. Some researchers have argued that the tip of the tail may have broken the sound barrier, creating a whip crack loud enough to startle predators or communicate across long distances. Others remain skeptical, noting that such movements may have risked injury to the tail itself. Yet even without supersonic speed, the tail was clearly a powerful tool, a counterbalance for the neck, a weapon against attackers, and perhaps even a social signal within the herd. The study of growth patterns has also offered new insights. By slicing thin sections of fossil bones and examining them under microscopes, paleontologists can see growth rings, much like those in trees. These rings reveal how quickly Apatosaurus grew and how long it lived. The evidence suggests that young Apatosaurus grew with astonishing speed, reaching near adult size in just a decade or two. This rapid growth would have been a survival strategy, allowing juveniles to escape vulnerability as quickly as possible. Adults, once fully grown, may have lived for many decades, their size and endurance giving them a long reign over the Jurassic landscape. Diet too has been reconsidered with modern science. Analysis of wear patterns on Apatosaurus teeth, combined with studies of plant fossils from the Morrison Formation, suggest a varied diet of conifers, cycads, and ferns. Unlike some sauropods that specialized in low browsing, Apatosaurus appears to have been a generalist, capable of feeding across multiple levels of vegetation. Its narrow skull and chisel-shaped teeth were not for chewing but for stripping leaves, which were then processed in its vast gut. Recent studies even suggest that its digestive system may have relied on microbial fermentation, much like modern ruminants, turning tough plant matter into usable energy over long periods. The environment in which Apatosaurus lived has also been reimagined. Once thought to be swamp-bound, modern evidence shows that it roamed dry plains, floodplains and forests, fully capable of supporting its own weight on land. Fossil trackways reveal herds moving across open ground, their footprints pressed deep into mud and sand. These tracks show not only the size of the animals but also their behavior, juveniles walking among adults, herds traveling in loose formation, and individuals occasionally striding side by side. Each trackway is a frozen moment of life, a reminder that these were not skeletons but living creatures moving through their world. Even the question of Brontosaurus has been revisited in modern times. For decades, the name was considered invalid, a synonym of Apatosaurus. But in 2015, a comprehensive study of sauropod bones suggested that the differences between the two were significant enough to warrant separation. Once again, Brontosaurus was recognized as distinct, a close cousin of Apatosaurus, but not the same. The debate continues, but for many, the return of Brontosaurus feels like a reunion with an old friend, a reminder of how science is always evolving. Perhaps most remarkable of all is how new technologies allow us to bring these giants to life in ways never before possible. Digital reconstructions create moving models of Apatosaurus, showing how it walked, how it held its neck, how its muscles rippled beneath its skin. 3D printing allows researchers to recreate bones and test their function physically. Computer simulations of airflow suggest how it may have breathed, how its calls may have resonated, how it communicated with its herd. Each advance peels back another layer of mystery, giving us glimpses of a creature that vanished long before humans ever walked the earth. And yet, despite all this progress, there remains a sense of humility. For all we know, there is so much more we do not. The fossil record is incomplete, the details of behavior forever lost to time. We can model and simulate, but we cannot stand beside an Apatosaurus and watch it feed, or hear its calls with our own ears. Our reconstructions are approximations, informed by evidence but colored by imagination. The deceptive lizard remains, in many ways, deceptive still. What modern science has given us is not certainty but a deeper appreciation of possibility. Apatosaurus was not a sluggish swamp dweller, but an efficient land roamer. It was not a solitary beast, but part of herds that shook the ground as they moved. Its bones were not solid weights but airy structures designed for balance. Its life was not simple but complex, shaped by growth, feeding, communication, and survival. To look at Apatosaurus today is to see both the past and the present entwined. Its fossils remind us of a world long gone, but the science used to study it is cutting edge, a product of human ingenuity and curiosity. In this sense, Apatosaurus is not only a symbol of prehistoric life, but also a symbol of our own journey to understand the past. As we leave behind the realm of science, our next step is to consider how Apatosaurus has lived not only in stone and study, but in story and culture. From books to films, from toys to art, it has captured human imagination for generations. Let us now step from the realm of fossils into the realm of myth, and see how Apatosaurus has become more than a dinosaur. It has become an icon. Though Apatosaurus vanished from the Earth nearly 150 million years ago, it has never truly disappeared from our minds. Fossils may have revealed its bones, but it is imagination that has breathed life into them again and again. Few dinosaurs have walked so confidently between the world of science and the world of culture as Apatosaurus, known at times as Apatosaurus and at others as Brontosaurus. It has become not only a scientific subject but also a cultural icon, a creature woven into stories, art, films, and dreams. The story begins with its discovery in the late 19th century, at a time when dinosaurs were only just emerging into the public consciousness. Newspapers eagerly reported the finds of marsh, cope, and their rival fossil hunters. Words like Brontosaurus and thunder lizard leapt off the page, stirring excitement and awe. For the first time, the public was confronted with the idea that creatures of unimaginable size had once walked the land. Illustrators filled magazines with towering monsters wading through swamps or stretching their necks toward the treetops. Even if the details were wrong, the wrong skulls, the wrong posture, the wrong environment, the image of a long-necked giant captured the imagination. In the decades that followed, Apatosaurus, often under the more dramatic name Brontosaurus, became a staple of popular dinosaur art. Early murals in museums depicted it as a swamp dweller, half submerged in water to support its massive weight. These images, though inaccurate, became imprinted in the public mind. Generations of visitors walked into museums and stood in awe beneath skeletons of these giants, their imaginations filling in the missing flesh with visions of living thunder lizards. By the early 20th century, Brontosaurus had become a household name, appearing in books for children and adults alike. Writers described it as the quintessential dinosaur, massive, gentle, and ancient. Its very name carried mythic weight. Thunder lizard conjured visions of storms rolling across plains, of mountains walking, of earth shaking with every step. Even when scientists corrected the name, insisting that Brontosaurus was really Apatosaurus, the public clung to the thunder. The cultural power of this dinosaur only grew with the rise of cinema. In 1915, one of the first great dinosaur films, The Birth of a Nation's predecessor, The Dinosaur, and The Missing Link, later followed by Willis O'Brien's pioneering stop-motion films, featured long-necked dinosaurs modeled after Brontosaurus. In 1925, Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World leapt from page to screen, with Brontosaurus among the starring creatures. These stop-motion behemoths lumbered across black and white screens, astonishing audiences who had never seen such lifelike monsters. For many, these early depictions defined dinosaurs themselves, slow, immense, and strangely majestic. By mid-century, Brontosaurus was everywhere. Children's books often included it as the gentle giant, a friendly counterpoint to the fearsome Tyrannosaurus. In illustrations, it towered peacefully above swamps and forests, its long neck arched like a swan. For children growing up in the 1950s and 60s, Brontosaurus was often their first introduction to the concept of dinosaurs, its image appearing in classrooms, cartoons, and toys. Perhaps nowhere was this more visible than in the world of animation. In 1960, the Flintstones brought dinosaurs into suburban life, and Brontosaurus was front and center. Its massive back became a crane for construction sites, its tail a playful hazard, its size a constant gag. Though scientifically inaccurate, this version of Brontosaurus captured the imagination of millions, blending prehistory with humor and fantasy. Later, in 1988, Don Bluth's animated film The Land Before Time introduced audiences to Littlefoot, a young sauropod modeled on Apatosaurus. Here, the gentle giant was reimagined as a character of vulnerability and courage. Littlefoot's journey across a prehistoric world resonated deeply with children, teaching lessons about loss, resilience, and the importance of community. Through Littlefoot, Apatosaurus became more than bones and reconstructions. It became a symbol of innocence, endurance, and hope. And then came Jurassic Park. In 1993, Steven Spielberg brought dinosaurs to life with unprecedented realism, blending animatronics and computer graphics to create creatures that felt utterly alive. Among the stars was a herd of long-necked sauropods, modeled more on Brachiosaurus than Apatosaurus, but the cultural impact spilled over. Audiences gasped as they saw the giants rear up to feed, their immense forms moving with grace beneath a blazing sun. Though not Apatosaurus directly, the scene revived global fascination with long-necked dinosaurs, ensuring that creatures like Apatosaurus would forever remain at the center of the dinosaur pantheon. Apatosaurus itself finally had its own cinematic moment in Jurassic World in 2015. Here, a dying Apatosaurus felled by a hybrid predator lay across the screen in one of the franchise's most poignant scenes. Its breath slow, its eye glistening, it became a symbol not of terror but of empathy, of the vulnerability of even the mightiest creatures. For audiences, this was not simply a monster but a being worthy of mourning, a reminder that giants too can fall. Beyond film, Apatosaurus has thrived in countless other corners of culture. Toys, from plastic figurines to building sets, have placed it in the hands of children for generations. Books continue to feature it as the archetypal sauropod, whether in scientific reconstructions or fantastical adventures. Artists across the world paint it into landscapes both real and imagined, sometimes in painstaking accuracy, sometimes in dreamlike wonder. Its form has become shorthand for the concept of a dinosaur itself, long-necked, long-tailed, immense. Even in music, literature, and popular imagination, the name Brontosaurus carries weight. Bands have adopted it, writers have invoked it as metaphor, and storytellers have used it as a symbol of power, endurance, or ancient mystery. It lingers in our language, our art, and our sense of time, bridging the gap between science and story. But perhaps the most striking part of Apatosaurus's cultural journey is how it has been embraced as something more than a monster. Unlike Tyrannosaurus, often portrayed as fearsome and violent, Apatosaurus is typically shown as gentle, peaceful, even kind. It is the dinosaur children befriend in stories, the dinosaur that grazes quietly in the background, the dinosaur that embodies not fear but wonder. Its size inspires awe, but its demeanor inspires calm. This gentleness may be why Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus endures so strongly in our collective imagination. It is not only a reminder of prehistory's might, but also of its peace. When we think of it, we do not only see bones and muscles, we see families grazing together, herds moving across valleys, silhouettes against sunsets. We see not only survival but community, not only strength but serenity. And so, in culture, Apatosaurus has become more than a dinosaur. It has become a mirror of ourselves, reflecting our longing for connection, our fascination with scale, and our hope that even in a dangerous world, there can be gentleness among giants. As we leave behind this exploration of imagination and culture, we return once more to the quiet of the prehistoric night. The giants have walked through science and story, through bone and myth. Now it is time to bring them back to the place of dreams, to imagine lying beneath the stars as a herd of Apatosaurus moves slowly in the dark, their presence steady, their breaths deep, their world timeless. In our next journey, we will settle into that stillness, envisioning what it might feel like to rest among them, safe within the company of giants. As we drift toward the closing of their story, the light of day fades over the Jurassic plains. The golden sun dips low, casting long shadows across the land, and the world grows quiet in anticipation of night. One by one, the voices of the smaller creatures shift. The chirps of diurnal reptiles soften, the buzzing of insects takes on a new rhythmic hum, and the cries of pterosaurs are replaced by the deepening chorus of the evening. Overhead, the sky blushes red and purple, then slowly darkens into a field of brilliant stars. It is here, in this twilight hour, that we settle into the company of Apatosaurus. The herd, spread across the valley, begins to wind down its daily rhythm. Necks that once swept tirelessly through groves of ferns and conifers now hang lower, the pace of feeding easing as the day's hunger fades. Some individuals fold their immense limbs and settle onto the ground with a weighty sigh, their bodies becoming resting hills beneath the stars. Others remain standing, swaying gently as they continue to strip the last leaves from the trees, their movements unhurried, unbothered by the creeping night. Close your eyes and imagine lying there on the soft Jurassic earth. The soil beneath you is warm from the day's sun, still carrying the scent of pine resin and damp ferns. Above, the vast silhouettes of Apatosaurus loom against the fading sky, their long necks curving like archways of living stone. Their breaths drift into the cool night air, each exhalation a low sigh, a mist that rises and disappears into the darkness. The soundscape of the herd at rest is unlike anything else. It is not silence, but a steady rhythm of life. You hear the slow thump of footsteps as one last giant shifts to a new patch of greenery. You hear the swish of a tail brushing against ferns, the gentle creak of muscle and bone as a neck lowers to the ground, and most of all, you feel the deep rumbling calls, not loud, not startling, but low vibrations that roll through the soil, through your body, until they become part of your own heartbeat. The calves nestle close to their mothers, their smaller forms pressing against the safety of colossal legs. They emit higher-pitched calls, soft and almost plaintive, answered by the steady reassurance of adult rumbles. In this exchange lies the bond of the herd, the invisible thread that ties each member to the whole. To drift off beside them is to be enfolded not just in the presence of one giant, but in the company of many, their collective watchfulness forming a circle of calm around you. As night deepens, the stars reveal themselves in impossible numbers. With no human lights to dim them, the heavens are ablaze with constellations unfamiliar to our modern eyes. They shimmer above the valley, mirrored in the calm waters of the river where reeds sway softly in the breeze. The silhouettes of the Apatosaurus reflect in the ripples, their bodies blending with the sky until they seem less like creatures of Earth and more like living parts of the cosmos. Predators, too, are part of this world, but even their presence cannot shatter the calm. At the edge of the forest, an Allosaurus watches, its eyes glowing faintly in the starlight. It takes a step forward, but the herd shifts as one. Tails lift, bodies tighten, and a low chorus of rumbles rolls through the ground. The predator hesitates, weighing its chances, then slips back into the shadows. For now, the herd remains undisturbed. Safety here is not an illusion, but a truth born of size, strength, and unity. The night stretches on, and the herd rests in shifts. Some lie still, their bodies rising and falling with slow breaths, while others stand alert, guardians of the darkness. This rotation ensures that at any moment, eyes are watching, ears are listening, tails are ready. Within this system, calves sleep soundly, their small chests rising and falling in rhythm with their mother's sides. The soft chorus of insects fills the air, blending seamlessly with the deeper undertones of the sauropods' rumbling voices. For the listener, this is a moment of profound stillness. You are part of this ancient night, lying in the shadow of creatures older than memory, older than human imagination. You feel their presence not as threat, but as comfort, their vastness transforming the valley into a cradle of calm. Every sound is slow, every movement deliberate, as though time itself has slowed to the pace of giants. The imagination lingers on what dreams, if any, an Apatosaurus might have had. Did it dream of endless fields of ferns, of rivers winding through conifer forests, of its herd moving as one across the plains? Did the calves dream of running without fear, of growing into the towering forms of their elders? We cannot know, but in the presence of their steady breaths, it is easy to believe that their sleep was as deep and enduring as their lives. As the hours pass, the moon arcs high, casting silver light across the valley. The giants glow softly under its gaze, their skin catching the pale shimmer like statues carved of stone. You watch as one slowly rises, stretching its neck toward the stars before lowering it again to graze lightly on a cluster of cycads. Another shifts position, its tail brushing the earth with a whisper. Even in rest, the herd is never entirely still, its movements subtle but constant, a reminder of life's eternal rhythm. The night moves toward dawn, and already the eastern horizon glows faintly with the promise of morning. The stars begin to fade, one by one, as the first light spills across the land. The herd stirs, calves rising to their feet, adults stretching necks and limbs. The chorus of rumbles grows louder, resonant, as if greeting the new day. The mist returns, rolling through the valley, wrapping the giants in veils of silver. For you, lying there among them, The experience has been timeless. The night has passed not in fear or restlessness, but in the calm assurance of the herd's presence. To sleep among Apatosaurus is to surrender to a rhythm older than humanity, to breathe in sync with giants, to feel part of a world vast and eternal. As the sun rises, the herd begins to move again, resuming its endless cycle of feeding and traveling. Their silhouettes fade into the distance, tails swaying, necks rising and falling, until they are once again part of the landscape itself. The ground beneath you is still warm from their presence, the air still humming faintly with their rumbles. You are left with the memory of having slept among giants, of having touched, if only in imagination, a world that lives on in stone, in science and in story. And so, as this journey with Apatosaurus comes to rest, we prepare to close the story. We have walked with them through the plains, watched them feed, understood their anatomy, explored their sounds, their social lives, their discovery, and their place in culture. We have seen them not just as fossils, but as living beings, part of a world alive with neighbors, predators, and endless cycles of life. Now it is time to drift with them one last time, into dreams, into the ancient night. And so our journey with Apatosaurus comes to a close. We have walked beside these giants through the warmth of the Jurassic sun, stood in awe at their immense size, and listened for the deep rumbles that carried through the valleys of their ancient world. We have seen them not as monsters, but as living beings, creatures of rhythm, of endurance, and of community. From the fragile eggs buried in sandy nests to the towering herds that shook the ground with every step, Apatosaurus reminds us of life's persistence. For millions of years they thrived, shaping their landscapes, protecting their young, and living in balance with neighbors both great and small. Their story is not only one of bones and fossils, but of breath, of sound and of presence, echoes of a world that once was. And though they vanished long before our species ever walked the earth, they remain with us. In every fossil, in every painting, in every whispered story of thunder lizards, they endure. Science continues to reveal new truths, while imagination continues to keep them alive in our hearts. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, let the image of Apatosaurus linger with you. Picture a herd beneath the stars, their long necks swaying gently, their tails brushing the earth, their voices rolling like distant thunder. Feel the calm of their presence, steady and timeless, as if they are watching over you, guiding you into dreams as deep and enduring as their world. Good night, and may the footsteps of giants carry you gently into rest.